The heat is just too much for some. As temperatures soar in Bosnia, people have been advised to stay indoors. The emergency care service in Sarajevo says it's treated more than 600 people for heat-related complaints in 24 hours. In neighbouring Serbia, many fled the city for this lake on the outskirts of Belgrade.
I prefer it when it's hot. Water and the beach. You need less clothes in any case.
And those who couldn't make the beach did what they could to keep cool. Kosovo hasn't been spared the scorching heat. The authorities have advised people to drink plenty of liquids and avoid going out during the day. Advice happily ignored by many in Pristina. As temperatures soar in Romania, Bucharest's fountains are the place to be, for those who can.
We're lucky we have air conditioning, but this hits our pockets. Gas consumption is high, so we get less money.
For those who aren't working, though, there are plenty of cheap.
Israel's continued construction of settlements on land captured in the 1967 Arab-Israeli War has been a major obstacle to a peace deal. Currently, products made by Israelis in the occupied territories are sold under the Made in Israel label. The European Union's Foreign Affairs Chief, Catherine Ashton, is pushing through rules to ensure that products from the occupied territories are labelled as such. The policy would implement long-standing consumer legislation. Maja Kocijancic, spokesperson for EU Foreign Affairs, spoke to VOA on the phone from Brussels.
Made in Israel as a label is misleading when it comes to settlement products. Currently, the internal consultations on this are ongoing.
The change would bring labelling rules into line with the official EU position on the Israeli settlements, says Rosemary Hollis, Professor of Middle East Policy Studies at City University London.
This is almost overdue in terms of carrying through on what they say is the legal status or lack of legal status of the settlements.
In 2009, an agreement between Israel and the EU liberalised trade in agricultural products and a range of services. EU imports from Israel soared to $16.7 billion last year. The row over labelling comes days after the European Union voted to block EU grants and loans to Israeli entities that are operating in the occupied territories. But the moves could backfire, says Barak Sina, an associate fellow at the Royal United Services Institute.
The EU has undermined its credibility, its relevance as an effective or even an impartial interlocutor between Israel and the Palestinians, because they're taking a prejudiced reading of UN Resolutions 242, which is purposely open-ended and ambiguous because the final status of the territories was meant to be a result of negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians.
Already, Israel, in retaliation, has blocked the EU from aiding tens of thousands of Palestinians in the West Bank. But US Secretary of State John Kerry's success in bringing the Israelis and Palestinians to the table was coordinated with Europe, suggests Yossi Alfa, former director of the Jaffe Center for Strategic Studies, who spoke to VOA on the phone from Israel.
It's difficult to avoid the impression that Kerry is working with the Europeans in order to apply at the exactly right time a certain degree of pressure to Israel with regard to the settlements and drive home the message that when it comes to issues relating to the West Bank and East Jerusalem, Israel is very much isolated.
The EU, meanwhile, says it does not yet have a timetable for the new labelling guidelines.
French car maker Renault's profits have fallen sharply. Latest figures show in the first 6 months of 2013 they were as low as 39 million euros, down from 734 million euros in 2012. The official reason? Illegal sanctions against Iran. Renault has been exporting car kits for years to its Iranian partner Iran Khodro under a joint venture.
The losses which have been announced come from the fact that Renault is not able to transfer its profits from Iran to France, so it has to write off the losses. If this continues, bigger losses can be seen next year. But even more important is the fact that Renault is trying to scale down its activities in Iran. That means that by next year, we may be seeing extremely huge financial losses for the French car maker.
Labour unions at the other big French car maker, Peugeot Citroën, have repeatedly protested against its exit from Iran. They believe leaving the Iranian market has caused job losses in France. According to Le Monde newspaper, before Nicolas Sarkozy became president in 2007, French companies had a gigantic presence in Iran. Car maker Peugeot and petroleum company Total left Iran when Nicolas Sarkozy sided with the United States over illegal sanctions against Iran.
In 2006, I think French presence was the biggest in Iran. If we compare it with this year's figures, it's a huge difference. To be honest, France badly needs the Iranian market. French companies, particularly car makers, cannot rely anymore on the national French market, which is in a bad shape, and losing Iran will be a serious loss at a bad time.
French companies which quit the Iranian market in order to follow illegal US sanctions against Tehran will face stiff competition if they wish to return back to Iran. That's because Asian giants like China have bypassed the sanctions to tap into the biggest market in the Persian Gulf.
The Pope's six-day visit to Brazil drew audiences of millions. His tour included a walk through one of Rio de Janeiro's most dangerous slums. And his papal mass on Copacabana Beach was attended by about 3 million worshippers, one of the biggest in recent history. But some of his most candid comments came much later, on his flight back to Italy, speaking directly to journalists on board. He answered questions on a series of controversial issues, including the role of women and gay rights.
Everyone writes about the gay lobby. I still haven't found anyone who gives me an identity card in the Vatican with gay written on it. All lobbies are not good. That is the bad thing. If a person is gay and seeks God and he has goodwill, who am I to judge him?
He upheld the ban on women priests, but added,
The Madonna, Mary, was more important than the apostles, bishops, deacons and priests. Women in the church are more important than bishops and priests. I think we have to do better at getting this message across. I think we're missing a theological explanation on this.
It was his first foreign trip as Pope. It will be remembered not just for the crowds he attracted in Brazil, but for his frank and open answers on the flight home.
Ordinary Pakistanis continue to pay the heavy price in the US-led so-called war on terror. Ever since Pakistan joined the US alliance following the 9/11 attacks, thousands of people either got killed or went missing. With the change of government, families of missing persons now have new hopes to reunite with their loved ones. Following the Supreme Court orders, the government of Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif has formed a task force in an effort to put an end to the practice of illegal abductions. The newly formed task force met in Islamabad to formulate a national policy on the issue.
It is a serious issue, and in the light of Supreme Court's directions, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif has directed Interior Minister Chaudhry Nisar Ali Khan to take appropriate steps to recover the missing persons.
The issue of missing people came to light in 2006 when the country's highest court took notice of disappearances of hundreds of Pakistanis. The families of missing persons have accused the country's intelligence agencies for illegally abducting people at the behest of the United States.
There are many agencies who are involved in it. They used to take poor citizen in their own custody. Their whereabouts are not known to anybody. So I think it is an attempt on behalf of the federal government. May and may not be. I cannot say anything, but I have no hope of any progress, keeping in view the past conduct of all other legal agencies.
However, Pakistan's security agencies have always denied allegations that they are being behind the disappearances of people.
On the 21st day of Ramadan, the first Imam of Shias, Imam Ali, peace be upon him, departed from this life as a martyr due to injuries he sustained by a sword. He was a man who had given everything to others, who had been oppressed but never thought of revenge, who forgave his enemies, who helped the weak and fathered the orphans. Eve of Imam Ali's martyrdom anniversary is also among the holiest nights for Shias. Laylatul Qadr, also known as the Night of Destiny, is observed as one of the nights of 19th, 21st or 23rd of Ramadan. Muslims believe that this night is better than 1,000 months.
I'm not going to talk about the details. I'm going to just say here it has a feeling that I cannot find in any other places. Then I can easily say I purify my soul. That's all.
This is often interpreted as praying throughout this night is rewarded equally with praying for 1,000 months. Many Muslims spend the entire night in prayer.
On this night, Muslims call on God by His various names and make requests. We've been promised that God will give us whatever we ask of Him if it's good for us.
Laylatul Qadr is also the night during which the Almighty revealed the entire Quran to Prophet Muhammad. It was then that the angel Gabriel first spoke to him and was thus the beginning of his mission. The night has other names as the Night of Power or Night of Destiny.
The nights of destiny are very important to Muslims. As we have Nowruz, which is the beginning of the calendar year, these nights are the beginning of the spiritual year. Muslims call on God by His various names and ask Him to create a good destiny for them for the next year.
Laylatul Qadr is a night in which our destiny is determined for 1 year, so many people have come here to declare that they are servants of God for another year.
Muslims hold their holy books on their heads, cry, and ask God to forgive their sins and help them be a good servant until the next year and another Laylatul Qadr.
Another day of violence in Iraq. Scores of people, mainly Shia Muslims, have been killed and many more injured in a fresh wave of bomb attacks across the country. In the capital, Baghdad, dozens of civilians lost their lives and scores were injured in a series of coordinated bomb blasts in several parts of the city. Officials say the bombs were hidden in parked cars and mainly targeted busy market streets.
Since 2003, there's been a global trend to concentrate terrorist groups in Iraq. We are chasing these groups and we captured many of the armed gangs.
Authorities in the southern city of Basra have also declared a state of emergency there following a deadly bomb blast there. Several people have also been killed in a similar bomb attacks in several other cities, including Simawa, Tikrit and Kut.
I think what encourages terror cells to grow is the political harassment between officials in the media and the presence of the external support for these groups.
The spiraling level of violence is also making Iraqis frustrated. Ordinary citizens are calling on their leaders to come up with a solution to the crisis.
What is the fault of construction workers and innocent children who were playing in football stadiums to kill them that way? Politicians wrangle on personal issues and people get killed by terrorists.
Deadly bomb attacks and shooting have plagued Iraq since the 2003 US-led invasion.
They came to remember the dead. The city of Santiago de Compostela mourning the victims of last Wednesday's train crash. Traditionally at this time of year, the imposing cathedral is the site of celebrations for the Feast of St. James. But on this day, It was where relatives of the deceased gathered with Spanish politicians and members of the royal family, paying homage to lives lost in the tragic accident.
Well, as many have gathered out.
The 52-year-old had 3 decades of experience of working on Spain's rail service, an experienced train driver for 10 years, but during questioning he admitted he'd had a lapse of concentration when the crash occurred. A shock for colleagues who viewed him to be a responsible driver.
It's terrible. It's a catastrophe. He must be having an awful time, as you can imagine. We are all very sad, and we will try to give him encouragement so that man can be a person again. Because if that happens to someone, they will drown for the rest of their life.
As those are left behind to mourn, the investigators are now turning their attention to the train's black box. There possibly lie the answers as to why Garzón failed to brake in time, or if there was indeed a mechanical fault that played a part in this disaster. Sonia Gallego, Al Jazeera, Santiago de Compostela.
Advocates are mobilizing across California to protect inmates taking part in a statewide hunger strike. Relatives of the inmates are organizing rallies to bring awareness to what they say are the torturous conditions in California's security housing units, or SHU. Actions come after the death of Billy Sell, an inmate being held in a solitary cell in Corcoran State Prison. The Prisoner Hunger Strike Solidarity Coalition says Sell was taking part in the strike and had requested medical attention several days before his death. However, prison officials say Sell was not refusing food at the time of his death. Officials also say that they are investigating Sell's death as a possible suicide. But inmate advocates say they don't believe what the officials are saying.
It's a lie. Everything's not under control, and it's the world is watching. What's going on? California, what's the problem? Why do you have so many prisons? Why do you incarcerate so many people? There's a problem. It didn't used to be this way.
With the strike now entering its 3rd week, family members say their support is more crucial than ever. They say the remote location of Pelican Bay makes it difficult to see their loved ones in person.
To go visit him is like more than 14 hours to 16 hours to travel there and to see him for an hour through the window.
Advocates say they're angered that state officials have remained silent throughout the strike. They say officials have refused to meet with groups that want to find alternatives to indefinite isolation.
They're not even willing to say, okay, the world says this is torture. The UN says what we do is torture. And to just deny that it's the case is just amazes me.
Families say officials could end the strike by just agreeing that indefinite solitary confinement is a violation of human rights.
It is inhuman because they are already on jail. So what more punish can they have? You know, it's another jail inside the same jail. But even worse because they cannot have any contact.
This is the 3rd hunger strike in California in the past 2 years. Inmates say they are prepared to do whatever it takes to force California to close the SHUs for good. Ross Frazier.